Welcome. We are delighted to have y'all today. Appreciate you joining us. My name is Sarah Butler, and I am the Director of Professional Services at the Unilink Group. We are a full-service EDI provider, and joining me today is Ethan Price, one of our senior developers in the manufacturing space, as well as Mitch Kopman. He's the Director of Sales and Marketing. And we hope, there looks like there's some technical difficulties, but Scott Stackhouse will also be joining us once he has those technical pieces worked out. Today, we're going to be talking about EDI in Infor XA and how to future-proof your EDI. Mitch, I know you've been going to the Empower conference for a number of years now, and you have a lot of conversations there with folks. What are people saying?
Well, it's interesting. Do we want to go on to the next slide there, Sarah?
Yes, we sure do. I'm looking at it right here.
Okay. That's fine. So it's interesting in that I talk to technical people, I talk to business people, I talk to executive level management people, and most of them, I'd say most of them, probably 9 out of 10 of them are familiar with EDI, and either they do it themselves, which is mostly the case, or they've chosen to not do it. The interesting thing about it is the ones that are doing it, like doing it, but they get anxiety about the staff that they have and the resources that they have. And whether it's that they only have a limited amount of resource, or that they literally have a group of people, but they need to be doing multiple things, it just spreads that resource thin, and it makes it very, very much a, I have to live with what I got kind of thing. So they get very, very, nervous about it. And then the other thing I've also heard more than a few times is, this particular industry, we've been around for a while, and people are retiring, and we're worried about where the next wave of people are going to come from to do that. And it makes for the sustainability of this whole approach to become in jeopardy, and it makes people very uncomfortable. So I think that's kind of what I hear. But I will also say it's funny, because the last thing is, all that said, people are also very hesitant about change. They're used to it. They've been in control of it. They've been doing what they've been doing for years. It works. So why upset the apple cart? But again, it becomes that balancing act between stay the course, worry about whether we're, what we've got coming down the road and how we can handle that. So that's kind of, it's an interesting dichotomy that goes on that I hear on a regular basis when I'm at these meetings. So I hope that helps you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So, these are all things that people are talking about, right? These are conversations that folks are having. I mean, then the next question is, what should we do about it, right? What is a manufacturer? What's someone to do? And let's talk about what that means. Mitch, I'm going to call on you again. There's a couple different options, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, so the fact of the matter is, they can, and this is a cute slide, that they can go look for somebody else, right? Obviously we're not advertising in newspapers much anymore, but we're going on Indeed, or we're looking at LinkedIn, or somebody knows somebody, but we're having to do a search, we're having to onboard somebody, and there's lots of cost involved in that. Plus the cost of an FTE that in today's market is still extremely expensive. But that's one route you can go. The other route is to consider using a service like what we do, and look at something like that as an alternative. And the big thing is, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. You don't have to jump all in, which is something that I think is important, is that what I hear from people is they either need to control it all or they're going to outsource it all, and neither of those may be the best solution. So there is the possibility to do kind of a mix and match world.
So let's talk about what that mixed piece looks like, and the decisions that you have to make doing that. Should you really be considering outsourcing EDI, and what does that look like? And critically, if you decide to look at an outside vendor, what criteria are you looking for? And Mitch, you've talked with a number of companies about evaluating outside service providers. So what do those conversations look like?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. Obviously cost always is a factor, and you got to look at, the cost of using an outside service versus doing it in-house. Are there long-term agreements? How do the fee structures set up? And then the other piece is what happens if there's problems? How does that work? Who do I talk to? And in the whole setup process, how much do I have to be involved? There's just numerous things that you want to go through when you're looking at a service. And candidly, I mean, if you're doing it in-house, you kind of know those steps. So, if I'm going to let somebody do it outside, how many of those steps are they going to be able to handle for me? And am I going to be comfortable with them handling that? Because, if I'm going to give them my largest customer or my biggest vendor, because that's how they're going to, potentially that's where the biggest gain is, well, that might make me a little nervous. So I got to be comfortable knowing that they have the experience to do that, and they're not just, just testing something out, and trying it, and then I'm not their beta, So those are things I think that I hear when you start talking about looking at a service, and who generally, who are the people you're going to work with at the service, and what kind of turnaround can I expect? What kind of data transparency do I have? All those pieces come to bear in that conversation.
Yeah. I think the other piece that Ethan, you and I look at is, what does their technology look like? Are you managing everything in-house, and you have, customized that solution so heavily? How does a outside integrator hook into that? Ethan, I know you've worked with a manufacturer who started off with a small. Can you talk a little bit about how that looked and what that situation looked like?
Yeah. So it's kind of like Mitch was talking about. They were a little hesitant getting into EDI from the get-go, just because they had done it their way for so long. So trying to use an outside service was had a little anxiety for them, which was totally understandable. So they tested us out, kind of ran it as like a trial period of just adding on. I think it was like their two smallest customers just to start out with, just to get a feel for how the EDI process works. Is this actually a workflow that we want to continue with? Do we actually see benefits from it over our old model? And they realized very quickly, literally within a month or two of probably being in production with those two new customers, that yes, EDI was very beneficial to them. They were saving tons of time, not having to manually order things, being able to use their ERP and our services for being able to check for duplicate orders from those customers that maybe didn't have the cleanest data coming from their side. And like I said, after that couple of months, we ended up starting on a project to onboard all of their customers that they had onto EDI, and now they intended to start with 2, and I think they're up and over 30 or 40 now at this point in our system, which is fantastic and been a great experience to work with.
Yeah, it also reminds me of another manufacturer we've worked with who has multiple divisions, some on XA, some on other ERP platforms, and they have decided to consolidate. And they selected Unilink to work with as one of many EDI providers, and the conversations we had with them as we were working with one of their divisions led to them deciding to move all of their EDI business to us. Let's let's talk about a little bit. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but let's talk about because of our model and how we work with companies. Let's go ahead and start talking about how we work together. Ethan, I'm gonna jump to you, talking about what does a successful implementation look like, and how do we work with a company to bring them successfully and either into EDI or migrating their EDI to us?
Yeah, sure. And so for the most part, normally it all is going to start with just the scoping of the project, making sure we have all of the trading partners that you want to implement with EDI identified, making sure we have contacts at those companies, and then we can start reaching out to them to, gather their information. How does that company actually use EDI? Do they, is it an FTP connection? Is it with a VAN? Do they have another third party that they might work with? And so trying to lay all that out and just laying out the ground rules kind of for the project. And most of that's done kind of in tandem with Unilink and the client at the same time, because we can do some of the more technical reach out, trying to define the technical specs of the EDI versus they actually know, Bob in accounting over there or something and have that personal relationship. So the nice benefit to have both there. And so once we have all of that information, we'll start working on onboarding you and making sure, you can connect to our system, your ERP connects to our system, and data can flow back and forth. And we begin the mapping process from there, which is just a simple process of converting your data out of XA or whatever your ERP might be into a format that is acceptable by your trading partner, whether that's EDI X12, an XML format, a spreadsheet maybe even. And then also mapping vice versa, so the information coming from your trading partner actually maps into XA or whatever your ERP might be. And then, once we have that mapping done, we can test the data flow between you and your trading partner. And make sure, everything's all good, pricing's worked out, all the part numbers are there, and we can move towards go live. And that's kind of done in that 5-step process that Sarah has on screen here. You can see the yellow parts, that kind of gathering data is done by the customer mainly, and then the blue parts are Unilink actually doing the mapping and the development, and then the green being us combined is where we're all going to do the testing together to make sure everything is unified on the same side.
Thanks, Ethan. And I'm going to sort of jump back because we've talked about what sort of that success and what that process looks like. But one of the concerns that we have heard on more than one occasion is, how do you make sure you're maintaining control of that data? Letting it go to an outside provider is scary, particularly if you haven't done a lot of that in the past. So how do you make sure that it looks okay? Ethan, do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah. So typically, once we're doing the actual testing of the mapping, it's mainly I'll be working with a technical person on the client side more than anything, so they know the technical details of how the two systems interwork. But once we actually have those technical details worked out, we will then bring in somebody from their accounting team or maybe one of their buyers into the testing process so that they can actually validate the whole workflow and the full data to make sure the workflow isn't going to be it's not going to interrupt their day-to-day working operation more than it actually has to, and also making sure that the orders do look right in the system or that the invoices are actually coming out at the right price, and having somebody that does that day to day actually validate the testing at the end of it is really, really important.
Yeah, I agree. And Scott, thanks. Welcome. I do know Lauren said welcome. Scott, I'm going to pull you into the conversation now. You've also seen organizations as they have gone through the decision-making process of saying, hey, I'm worried about a resource who's getting ready to retire. They've told me they want to retire in the next 2 years, but they've built this behemoth custom solution. And I don't have anybody to train on it. And while 2 years, I could certainly get that training done, I think I want to go outside. What have you seen as sort of like that tipping point where folks start to say yes, going out to a third-party service provider is the right call?
So typically in the ERP customers that I'm dealing with, they have two challenges. One is they're getting into the EDI space for the first time. They've started getting requirements from their large customers and their large vendors that they have to go to some type of systematic solution because phone calls, emails, PDF documents is just not very efficient. And especially when you have large customers and vendors, they're just going to basically tell you, you've got to go EDI, and you don't really have a choice if you want to keep them. But then the other point to what you just mentioned, Sarah, is the expertise that you may have in-house or you contract with too, because a lot of my customers will contract with outside organizations, and those organizations have been small, and so they're moving into the retirement phase just like in-house. So they're trying to figure out a long-term solution on how they can get the technology, get the support they need to do this with limited resources on their end to do the work.
Yeah, thank you. So we're jumping around a little bit, but what for those who maybe have been doing it for a while and have said, I'm ready to select an EDI provider. What are some of the strategies, Ethan? What are some of the strategies we've seen people say, "Hey, okay, I'm ready to start the EDI journey with Unilink"? There's a few different ways people can approach it. So what are two of the ways that people have decided to say, yes, let's do EDI? I know you just talked about one example, but what's another way?
Yeah, so I think Mitch kind of hit it, and Scott hinted at it as well. If you've got some of these bigger customers or bigger vendors, you're almost forced to do EDI because they don't want to do the manual process. And then some of the other ones just kind of come from, you've noticed, I think I mentioned previously in the example that I had given before, they had noticed from their smaller customers that maybe some of the data wasn't as accurate, and having a person manually validating that isn't as consistent as having a system to actually do it. So that was another approach they actually took to, make the jump into EDI. Having that extra automated validation of their data and everything was a big point for them, I think.
Yeah, yeah, no, it does. The other thing that I've seen is, a company says, well, I like what I currently have, but I have this new customer, or this new vendor has finally said, yeah, they're ready to do EDI. So I will try with you and see if I like what, see if I like it. And then that gives you the peace of mind saying, well, I'm not touching my existing, or I'm going to touch one of my existing because they're updating their format. And so my developer has to rewrite it anyway. So I'll just, I'll migrate that instead. Or like what we've said already is, someone new is demanding it. And I don't want to touch what I already have, but let's start there.
Sarah, the other thing that comes to mind too, if I don't mind me jumping in, is
yeah, go ahead.
There's unique requirements that they're not used to doing. We have such a broad experience as a service, and we work with so many different trading partners, and it feels like almost every one of them is different for some reason. That's something that can be, can also be an option for somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about how we talked about what a successful implementation looks like. Let's talk about how all of that comes together in working with Unilink. Ethan, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So as you can see in the slide here that Sarah has pulled up, so we've got the ERP or partner or consultant on the left side. So that's going to be, your ERP tech support basically is what you're looking at there. Some kind of value-added reseller, or maybe it's an in-house expertise that you actually have that we can work with. So then it would be, our potential client. That would be, whoever, your company. And then the EDI data center that Unilink actually owns, and making sure that connection is between the two of them. XA has a lot of different options for that. There's a couple of different direct connection options. There's EC and ECC, so a couple of different things we can utilize there. So that just makes a one-to-one connection between your ERP system and our data center. And then we will make that one-to-many connection out to your different trading partners, whether that's just 1 or 2 or 30 or 40, like we had mentioned before. And we've got a lot of different options to be able to connect to those. We can use AS2 VAN connections. VAN connections I know are a sticky one because you have to buy into that network if you aren't already in it. So that can be a bit of a cost point sometimes. So going through a third party like us kind of helps with that. And there's a lot of other options. Maybe you actually want to set up EDI with a customer who doesn't actually have EDI capabilities on their end. You could use a third-party provider to have them send in spreadsheets or PDFs or something along those lines and still get the benefit of automated EDI from your side without actually interrupting their workflow or putting any extra requirements on your customer.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Let's talk about a piece of what you just said, which is sort of that middle, those two big circles between where it says our client and the EDI data center. There's a few different ways that we can connect to XA. Scott, do you want to talk about a few of them, and we can fill in some of those other pieces?
Sure. So one of the primary communication points in today's XA world is the product called ION, and that is a product that runs under Infor OS, but it handles the connectivity in and out of your XA or out of your Infor products. It's built to operate not only with XA, but with other ERP systems and other applications like WMS. So ION is a critical communications piece with Infor XA. And it simplifies the back and forth connection. So the connection to XA in this case is already built. The connection to something like Unilink, they've gone through the effort to build those interfaces back and forth to ION because those were not developed by Infor. So ION is probably the biggest communication piece. Like I said, it's part of Infor OS. But everyone kind of sees Infor OS and ION as a synonymous application. And that's certainly the largest piece of Infor OS. The other connections you have listed there are more customized and direct between the ERP and the EDI product. So, but the ION one is the biggest piece, and that's Infor stated direction going forward as the communication method too. So while the others are supported, Infor is pushing toward ION as its long-term solution.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and for the folks who are still not yet on cloud, that EEC is another native Infor option for those who have that license, and then the others are another option as well. Good. But you do need one of those, right? Like that's the message here, is that you do need one in order to be able to do that translation, no matter if you're using Unilink or doing it yourself. You have to have a way to get the data in and out of XA. Let's talk about once it comes out of XA. Unilink would be translating and sending that data to and from your trading partner, whether that's a vendor or your customer. And how do you know what's getting sent? How do you know if there's any challenges? Ethan, we have a customer portal, and our customers have given us a lot of feedback around it. Can you talk about, and also a lot of positive feedback as well. Can you talk about what folks really enjoy using the portal for?
Yeah, sure. I think some of the bigger ones that I almost always hear about, and you can kind of see it in the screenshot there. There's a couple of rows highlighted in green, one highlighted in red at the bottom, and so it allows you to be able to see at a glance really easily the actual status of, in this case, purchase orders, but I see it a lot for invoices as well, in the manufacturing space, of wanting to know, are there invoices coming in correctly, because that's how you get paid basically. And so you'll be able to see just at a glance, was the invoice rejected, or is it unacknowledged and actually didn't get to your trading partner system? And then in our portal, you actually have the ability to select one of those individual documents and view the initial input data that would have came from your trading partner or your ERP system, the middle translated version that we use internally, and then if there is an output format, you can see all three of them. So you actually get to see the translation of the data as it happens through the system. And one of the benefits to that I've seen is mainly on inbound orders coming into their ERP system. They'll actually be able to review the input data from their trading partner and notice, oh, there's payment terms or something along those lines, data that wasn't on their file originally, and be able to add that later on. So it's an extra added benefit that you can do, once you actually do have it in production.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's pause here and see if one of the questions I know we get, how long does it take to get started? And Ethan, do you want to talk a little bit about what that looks like? And
yeah, sure, I can. So I think the longest part that normally we run into, especially with new customers, is just getting that initial setup and workflow between our system, flowing data back and forth. And in my implementations, I typically try to do that before even reaching out to the trading partners, just to make sure that we internally have our testing workflow kind of designed and working for us, and then reaching out to the trading partners to actually start the testing at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I'd like to talk about, and I'm going to jump ahead some slides, is sort of best practice as we see for an EDI, integration. And Scott, I'm sure you've seen some of these as well, but particularly around that first one, you want to make sure that you're talking with your ERP consultant like ISE to say to make sure that that XA or whichever ERP you're on, that you have the components in place to actually do the integration. Do you want to talk about what some of those conversations look like, or what maybe some of the setup that folks might need to be thinking about before they start an EDI integration?
Well, a lot of the setups and preparation is the same as if using the internals of your ERP system. You've got to get the building blocks in place, the appropriate data in place with your customers, your vendors that are going to become your trading partners. Because if you don't have all that set up within your ERP system, it's only going to get propagated incorrectly and become a bigger issue. So spending the time getting all the building blocks within the ERP system set up properly. Are your customers set up properly to handle EDI? Are your vendors set up to handle it? Do you have you made decisions from a business perspective of what type of trading documents you want to do back and forth with your trading partner? What requirements do they have? Do they require acknowledgments is one of the big things. So because that adds a lot more transactions. So the more of those you can get kind of under your belt as far as your decision process, then when you hook up with your EDI vendor, they have a better perspective of what you're looking for. But you got to start with the building blocks within your ERP system and make sure all that's correctly, because it's the old adage of garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have things set up properly, it's just going to go out and spend a lot more time on the back end trying to deal with it.
Yeah, and that also speaks to that sort of last bullet point on here, which is thinking about if there's other integrations that you have within your ERP. Maybe something like MES that you all have, where that data that's there for the shop floor planning, whether that's inventory needs or also a pick, pack and ship type piece, if you're using a third-party tool for that, the data that's there flows into or can be affected by EDI, or at least it goes through EDI, depending on what kind of information you're exchanging with your vendor or your customer. And so you want to make sure that you're keeping those in mind as you do an EDI integration. Ethan, we already talked about the project timeline. but this really underscores the need to have the conversations early within your company about who's going to be involved and whose time is going to be needed, and making sure that you're doing that gathering of information well in advance, to know that you have all the pieces there to get started. That's probably the biggest delay that we see. Would you agree, Ethan, that someone's ready to get started, but their trading partner isn't ready, or they don't have the right data in place, or there's an upgrade that they're in the midst of, and so EDI is going to get pushed back.
And it's kind of like Scott said with getting those building blocks done early. I think another big delay that we see very frequently is, someone joins on and wants to have a couple of customers set up within 2 months or something along those lines. But on the customer side, they're not even familiar with actually trading data in and out of their system. So we need to get that part done first before you can even get to actually setting up EDI with your trading partners. So yeah, getting those building blocks done early is the biggest way to ensure success, I think.
Yeah, there's another component on this best practices that we have, which is smart mapping, and that's something that we've coined. We do a lot of very interesting and sometimes quite unique analytics and algorithms that we've created for our customers, unique customer needs. Can you give me an example or two of some of those pieces?
Yeah, sure. I think one of my favorites that I've done recently for another manufacturer was this manufacturer actually worked with a third-party warehouse to actually ship their products out to their end customer. They didn't do any of the shipping directly. They just shipped to this third-party warehouse. And one of the challenges they ran into in setting up EDI was their end customers were requesting advanced ship notices to let them know, your product's coming in on this day, this carrier, yada, yada. But because they weren't shipping the product, they actually couldn't generate the ship notice from their ERP system. And so we were able to use a smart map in tandem with the client and their third-party warehouse to actually use I think it was a shipping manifest, basically, that was coming back to our client from the third-party warehouse to create those ASNs and actually be able to send them out so that their customers got the end value that they were looking for. And that went really well, and it's still been in place. We've actually expanded it with a couple of more customers since then, so that's really nice.
Yeah. Scott, are there any other best practices that you would recommend for a manufacturer when they consider an EDI integration?
I think Ethan touched on a very good point about the third-party warehouses. That's becoming more and more of an upcoming thing in the business world, where you're trying to outsource some of the capabilities, and so being able to communicate not only with your EDI partner, but any other partners you might be dealing with, and any other pieces of software. You mentioned MESs earlier. Depending on how they interface back to your ERP system, there may be some setup issues around those. If your ERP system is kind of the center and everything works around it, that's easier, but that's, depending on the software you're using, that's not always the case. So making sure and looking at the big picture of how all your systems are integrated together. Where is the data elements that are going to be needed for an EDI application? Are they all within your ERP system? Are they in other systems? And how do you draw those in so that EDI can be done successfully? And on the flip side, where do they need to be dispersed? If EDI is on the inbound side, you're receiving orders and planning documents from your trading partners. Where do they have to be dispersed to once you receive them in your ERP and other systems? So kind of having the big picture of how that all works and some type of diagramming to show that really helps out a lot.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. No. Okay. Let's see. Make sure I get back to the right slides here. Mitch, one question that we do sometimes also see is more around the getting started. What do the conversations with us look like? Can you talk about what that looks like if someone says, okay, maybe? What's those sort of next steps look like?
Good question. I would say what typically with us, we'll schedule a call with folks that are interested, and we'll have somebody like Ethan on the call because we want somebody with technical expertise on there. and we walk through obviously the business questions that someone would have from a pricing and an expense perspective, and then talk about what their key I'm going to call it pains are at the moment. What's leading this change, and we're looking to understand. We're not looking to just dictate something because everybody's kind of different. And even though EDI has been around for years and years, it's still unique in its own way, and we really need to understand customer to customer, what's driving their EDI change, I'll call it. And I think when we're having that discussion, it comes out, and we're very receptive to all the different impacts that they have that they're dealing with. And it's a pretty simple conversation. It's not anything that's painful. I promise you that. So.
Yeah, great. Scott or Ethan, any other last thoughts you'd like to share?
Not that I can think of.
Great.
No, I think you guys have covered it. Having the upfront conversations and the upfront kind of assessments of where you are today, where you want to be. And then, the middle point, the middle ground is how to get, from where you are to where you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate the time to my co-presenters. Thank you for taking some time with me, and thank you to the attendees and Loring at Work Out Loud for having us today. Our contact information is here on the screen. I do see, okay, I do see a question. Do you offer a comp versus a comparison, I think, versus other providers in the marketplace?
Do we offer? I'm not sure I understand the question, Sarah. From a price perspective or from a services perspective, or both?
That's a great question. It looks like value. What value do you think you carry for doing the follow-up in the chat? What value do you offer versus others like True Commerce?
Well, so there, and I'll take this if you don't mind, Sarah. So
yeah.
That's a great question. The one thing that I would say particularly stands out that makes us unique is when you're working with us, you're working directly with somebody like Ethan. So you have direct access to the programmer or the person who's doing your maps. They are your project coordinator, as opposed to having a middle person or a customer service person you have to go through that has to go talk to somebody in the technical staff, which expedites the process tremendously. Plus, you know what's going on. And if there's issues, again, you're dealing with the person who's having to fight those battles for you, I think that's a big, big difference. From a price model perspective, candidly, I would be open to say that we tend to be a little less expensive than some of the others, but then also it depends how aggressive they are. And it also depends on the services that they're providing you. We're a full service provider. We want to take it all off your plate, but not have it be, but be transparent at the same time. So that's something that's a little bit unique about what we do as well. And the one other thing that comes to mind from the question asked was SPS is, our fee structure is transactional, but it's just with our customer. We don't charge your trading partners. And that's feedback I've gotten from folks working with some of the other providers, that the service provider will be getting it from both sides, and we don't do that. So those are key differences.
Thanks, Mitch.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I'd add, since my team is the one who actually does the implementation, mm-hmm. right? Like those are the folks like Ethan are the folks who come up, report to me. Our team is with you from the beginning, taking in, doing the requirements gathering, through the testing process, through the go live support, and then after in sort of like the maintenance once you're live, and into this customer support area, it's usually the same developer who's worked with you from the beginning. So they know your mapping, they know your business logic. You're not going through multiple layers of support to find someone who can help you. And that's something that the feedback when I've been talking with customers, they really like about working with us.
Mhm.
Any other last questions before we wrap up? Thank you very much for the question. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Carrie.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much for your time today. If you have other additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We appreciate the time and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.
All right.